Hello and welcome to San Diego Business Connection. Thank you for joining us. I'm Paola Hernandez-Jayo, Community Relations Manager at the San Diego Union-Tribune. At today's seminar, the San Diego Union-Tribune's marketing team will share the latest trends and best practices in QR code usage and how they can help you optimize your advertising campaigns and boost user engagement. Attendees will learn about the many advantages of using QR codes in advertising campaigns, what metrics are available to measure campaign success, and a review of the different QR code services available for use. The seminar is hosted by California Times, which consists of the Los Angeles Times, the San Diego Union-Tribune, and Stats Digital. If you're not familiar with Stats Digital, it's the California Times team of marketing experts who offer an analytics-based approach to digital advertising. Today's seminar is presented by Paul Ingeneri, Vice President of Advertising at California Times, and Jada Scarborough, Advertising Project Leader at California Times. We are going to have time for questions and answers during the last portion of the seminar. We do ask that you please write your questions in the Q&A box. You can see it at the bottom of the screen and not in the chat. This webinar is being recorded. The webinar and presentation will be available for you to watch and share next week at sanDiegoUnionTribune.com/San Diego Business Connection. The website URL is going to be listed in the chat. Now to begin today's seminar, here's Paul Ingeneri.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we think we've got a great agenda for you this morning as we go through QR codes. And I have to tell you that we've been spending a lot of time looking at this technology because, you know, in the early 2000s, it was an emerging technology, and then it kind of faded away, and suddenly it's got this renaissance and coming back, and you see it all over the place. Well, we're going to kind of review that. Let me give you a rundown on what we hope to cover today. A little bit of a background on QR codes, where they originated and such. Jada is going to talk about, and myself will talk about some best uses. We'll show you some examples of QR codes, some reporting that's available. So QR codes have this, in some instances, vast reporting. I like to call it, QR codes have the same thing as Google Analytics for your digital campaigns. So we'll share some of those reports with you. Jade is going to talk about creating a QR code. I'm going to review some case studies with you, and then we'll talk a little bit about different vendor types and comparisons. So again, in that background is California Times, the LA Times, San Diego Union-Tribune, Stats Digital. We reach about 45 million unique visitors across all of our platforms. So you can imagine our challenge on the marketing side is making sure that we are able to engage across all of these platforms in unique ways, but also in ways that individuals want to engage. That's really how we've started getting deeper into QR codes. And I think there's a there. And so we'll review a lot of that with you. Just to give you a background, QR codes were originated in 1994 from a subsidiary called DensoWave by Toyota. They were originally used to track automotive parts, so it's kind of interesting. And QR codes are two-dimensional, which I think is pretty cool. So it means that they store data horizontally and vertically. And I think you'll see the utility of their ability to do that. Advanced barcodes, which are the two-dimensional barcodes, hold a ton of data. And it's the advantage of today's QR codes. And as you know, many cell phones come pre-installed with QR readers. When QR codes, and I remember this, when they originally came out, it's like you had to download a different reader for different types of QR codes. And they sometimes worked and they sometimes didn't, even if they were the reader for a specific type of code. So it got to the point where it just wasn't a stable technology. Very frustrating. And I think that's why it kind of lost its luster. But now with technology is coming back in a much more robust fashion. A code can be reproduced on any surface with sufficient contrast. It's interesting. I was reading an article on QR codes the other day, and I saw an example of a QR code that was put together in fireworks. So, you know, when you do fireworks and you have these patterns that go up in the sky, someone was doing that as well. So I found that to be very interesting. Most QR codes are black and white, but you'll see that many have color to them as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that. In fact, the one on Jada's background is a demonstration of that. QR codes are short links to URLs, phone numbers, or any determined destination. We'll talk more about that as well. I think a positive is that a QR code, which is similar to a barcode, a QR code, from my understanding, you can have like a 30% degradation, but still read the QR code. Unlike a barcode, like how many times are you standing in line checking out, something's wrong with your barcode, and it's like you're standing in a line of 10 and everyone behind you is looking at you with a death stare because your barcode is messed up. So all QR code readers can decode embedded website URLs, but of course, some readers have different features, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So some readers decode better than others, by the way, and the quality of the phone, the camera, the lighting, steadiness of your hand, all has a lot to do with the ability to read a code. So obviously, QR code stands for quick response, collection of black squares and dots. And even that technology changing a little bit. We'll share some different logo types with you today, and how you interact with a QR code as a representative of your company is really going to be up to you. Jada will demonstrate to you. There's basic QR codes and basic opportunities for you at no charge, all the way up to some that charge monthly fees, but give you a lot more features across the board. So in the US, 73% of consumers have scanned a QR code in the last 30 days. So you can see this is no small audience opportunity. This is large. 92% of US consumers have scanned a QR code for something other than a restaurant menu. And I really like that restaurant menu emerged out of the pandemic, and the fact that rather than passing out menus, you were able to link onto a menu. So I thought that was pretty cool. 2/3 of consumers are more compelled to interact with a brand using a QR code. So keep that in mind, because we're all racing to make sure that we get our share of consumer time. So, all right, so let's dig in. And if we could, onto the next slide. It's interesting because some of us are just exposed to QR codes, I think, in very fundamental fashion, but really across every single media channel, you have an opportunity to utilize QR codes in a way that makes it easy for consumers to interact with you. So of course, you know, we're just laying out several different opportunities for you, whether it's across television or broadcast, of course, experiential at events. Jada's going to share with you some events that she attended and how the use of QR codes was used within the events themselves. Of course, print and direct mail. And I have to say, for some of our print and direct mail platforms that we represent, we're pushing very hard to make sure that our clients use QR codes so they get a greater utility out of their advertising. We think that that's critical. So we'll talk more about that and show you some examples that we're using and some of our clients are using in a few of our different platforms. I love this one, out of home billboards that have QR codes. It makes me think about the fact that you're driving down the street and you see a QR code, like, little dangerous, be careful, right? I'm not sure it's the best use, but it is a use nonetheless. On products and packaging, we'll show you a couple of different examples there. Business cards, especially digital business cards these days, And you will have access to our business cards at the end digitally. And we hope that you will interact with us and send us any further questions. The menu idea we talked about, in-store signs. Here's what I think is great. We all know that you walk into some retailers and, sometimes there's help there and sometimes there's not. Smart retailers are using QR codes for people right inside with point of purchase displays in their stores, answering questions for people and allowing them to engage at a much higher level. You wouldn't have thought about this, I think, but really some great stuff there. Here's the cool thing, our bullet points on the right, instant first-party data in many instances. Jada will review with you some of the reporting that's available on QR codes. We talk about saving space, especially within print advertising or direct mail. When you can have a link to a QR code, that QR code takes up a lot less space than trying to explain in greater detail what you can simply link to that QR code. So keep that in mind. It increases engagement. It drives social touches like crazy, which is great. The opportunity to do A/B testing, obviously capturing people's geo, knowing where they're at. Analytics are critical behind QR codes. When these were first established in the early 2000s, you didn't have the analytics that you do today. And we'll share some of that reporting with you. And then, of course, sending people to things like maps and other information. I added this, typing in a URL. People say all the time, like, hey, I can go to certain advertising and I get people's URLs. Well, sure you do, but who's going to type in a URL these days when you've got a QR code you can click and instantly go right to whatever destination that is. So just finding that interesting, and again, sharing that data and information with you. Okay, next slide. So just the powering interactive media for 95. So this was, by the way, I want to give shout outs to one of the partners that we have, which is Flowcode. They really do an awesome job, and working with JD, our buddy at Flowcode. They put together some information for us, and we're going to share some of that data today. One of the things that was put together was 85% of Fortune 1000 broadcasters reach their audience through QR codes. So think about that. That's pretty impressive. 36% of US consumers have scanned a QR code on television. We've got some examples of some broadcast or CTV examples for you coming up. It's got 3 times higher conversion rates with a QR code on TV than with digital. And you can see a host of brand names there that are utilizing QR codes within their marketing strategies, as we suggest we all do, right? So, all right, next slide, please. Just to show you some examples, and this is across multiple platforms. This is an example just how we're starting to see. We talk with our staff frequently. It's like, please make sure that we're talking with our marketing partners, our advertisers, about getting utility from advertising that they do with us. So we need to put our money where our mouth is. And what you'll see here are examples not only of advertisers who are using to a greater degree QR codes within their marketing messaging, but also the fact that we do as well, because we know the utility behind a QR code can help our clients engage with us in a much faster way and increase satisfaction as a result. So these are just some examples for your review. Next slide. You can see that large brands across all platforms are utilizing QR codes because they know that if they place this QR code in front of people, they then can get their code clicked on, and the interaction and engagement quadruples easily, right? So you can see name brands across all of our print portfolio or direct mail portfolios demonstrating the need for the usage of QR codes. And it isn't just contained to print, by the way. Next slide, please. Here's some examples. My thanks to Bosma, our client services director, pulled some great examples for you. Here's one from packaging with Nestle's, where you can go directly to their ingredients Of course, people are very ingredient savvy these days, whether it's counting calories or looking at the types of ingredients to make sure that they blend with their diet. Coca-Cola did a great product competition adding QR codes onto their cans. If you're getting this sense that there's nothing that you can't add a QR code to, you are correct. I think Jada will demonstrate to you, it's not like you can own one QR code and you only use that code linking to a specific destination. I mean, you can generate QR codes as many as you want across all of your platforms and across all of your products and across all of your contact pieces. So don't feel like there's limitations, because there's surely not. No different than you can generate URLs to have people visit different parts of your website or to different websites or landing pages. So anyway, great examples here. Next slide, please. I thought this was pretty cool, seeing the use in this emerging technology here, Mercedes-Benz for emergency rescue guidelines. This was on the inside of of a door of a Mercedes, where you click on that QR code. Keeping in mind, by the way, and I think this is critical, some QR codes, when you establish the code, Jada will review this, go to a single link. And when that link disappears, the QR code is no longer valuable. Linkable. Other QR codes, you can change the destination in your dashboard at will. So as you determine which QR code vendors you want to go with, just keep that in mind. Next, please. Jade, I'm going to leave this up to you. So this was part of your own travels and usage, yeah?
Correct. So recently I did some traveling and I just took some photos of the QR codes I interacted with the traveling. One of my favorites is at restaurants. You can now pay your check at the table. That's up in the top left there. It's pretty amazing. So you can, get your receipt immediately on your phone, use Apple Pay, whatever you want to use. Then had a QR code on my fortune cookie. You can also see them in flyers, which Paul referenced in direct mail and print, flyers around town. I saw this one for Project Paperback. And in my travel, I noticed a lot more this time. I did see QR codes in use. Obviously, everybody's traveled lately. They can, have a QR code as instead of printing their boarding pass, they have it in their phone. I took the train from San Diego up to Anaheim, and they have a QR code on your ticket. And on my receipt at the Atlanta airport, I got a feedback QR code. And then also, I thought this was really interesting use of space in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the baggage claim. A local university wrapped the entire column that the bags go around, so you can scan to get more information about attending the university. It's such a blank space, but now it's used for all of the advertising, and I can get to that URL instantly just by clicking or scanning that code. Next slide, please. Now, at the convention that I attended in Anaheim, which was WonderCon, there were a ton of examples. I just used these two. Obviously, there are tens of thousands of people in attendance, and you have a very small activation space and very limited staff. So they were using QR codes to give you information about when the product is coming, the price. Some codes were allowing you to pre-order. So it was really great. It's just in front of the product in the case, and you could get all the information you wanted. I didn't have to remember a URL later of something that I wanted to buy. And it also cuts down for smaller vendors on cost for producing business cards or product sheets or anything like that. You can just scan the code, have all the information you want. Another place that I attended, thank you, was the Comic-Con Museum, which is just opened this past year. I love the Comic-Con Museum. And this particular use of the QR code was to purchase merchandise that helps fund the Comic-Con Museum. and also their Yelp reviews, and to follow them on social media. So you can use it for pretty much anything you want to use it for. And Comic-Con Museum is definitely using it to the max of, their abilities.
Yeah, I might add, Jada, there's a fortune cookie company that allows retailers or marketing companies to put their QR code inside of the fortune on the fortune message, right? So you can imagine the engagement while you're sitting around after dinner and you're eating your fortune cookie. You crack it open and there's a QR code. Guarantee you everyone's going to scan that QR code, right?
Definitely, especially if the fortune's there as well.
Right.
Okay, next slide, please. So what I want to talk about now is creating a QR code. It's very simple. To me, it's just as simple as checking out on a website. Depending on the vendor that you get, they offer, or the vendor that you use, they do offer different links to products, so to speak. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be a URL, which is great if you're a small business and don't necessarily have a website that is easily updated, or a website person on staff. The QR code vendor that you choose can actually house what you want to link to, such as a PDF, a JPEG, a coupon code, anything like that. So majority of the vendors do offer these different types. I think some of the lower planned ones, or the lower price planned ones, or even the free options, may not necessarily allow you to open or link to a MP3 or a video, but that might be something that you could, add to your social if you did want to use that, and then that would be a link. So that you could get around that easily if you didn't want to go with a higher price vendor. So basically for this example, I just chose a URL. I chose San Diego Union-Tribune. Next slide, please. And then in this particular vendor that I'm using, it does allow me to change the color, shapes, and of the eye and the dots. So there are this is a middle of the line vendor in regards to customization of your QR code. Now, some vendors, such as Flowcode, will allow you to actually import a shape that you want to use, like a cowboy hat, a star, whatever, and it will actually build it around the QR code around that shape, or use that shape. So, but of course, Flowcode is one of the more expensive brands that you can use. This one that I'm using is called Beacon Stack. It's a middle of the road cost, and I really do like this one for this design element. It's just enough, not too much. And also their reporting is pretty robust as well. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So if you just go through the design elements on whichever vendor you use, it will allow you to change these things. It's really nice if you have a playbook for your branding. You can use the specific colors that you use. So it's really customizable to meet your marketing and branding needs. Next slide, please. So some of the vendors offer a different call to action frame. So these it might be a little bit small, but the different color frames in the right hand image say scan me. You can change the text to say, here, click here for promo code, whatever, or scan for promo code. And you can change the colors of those. So that's something that also, if you are looking to get your own vendor, that you would look at if that's something that you're interested in. And next slide, please. And then so that simple, you have a QR code, and it's ready to scan. This particular one just scans to the Union-Tribune, and that's the one I did for the test. So just in a few steps, just 4 steps for this, you've got your QR code. Depending on the vendor, it could be, a couple more steps, maybe 6, depending on the customizations, but it's really simple and really just a few steps to get going. Next slide, please.
Are those steps pretty universal across all of the different QR code vendors, Jada?
Yeah, they really are. Again, the extra steps are more of the customization. Some of them might have, 3 steps, some of them up to 6, but in all of the one all of the ones that I've dealt with, it's pretty much the 3 to 6 steps to get that QR code created. Now this is a QR code that we at the San Diego Union-Tribune used in our Salute to Nurses campaign. Every year we publish a special section that, you know, you can give a shout out to a nurse. So this is a QR code that we put into the ads to prompt people to nominate their nurse and give the reason why they're nominated. It allows them to say their, you know, put their name, why they're nominating, where they work, all that good stuff. So instead of having to remember a URL, they just scan it and it takes them directly to the form where we capture the data. It also gives the ability to, you know, get that information so that we can send them a response back saying we got your data. So nobody has to remember the URL. And this is actually the reporting from that. So this particular vendor shows me number of scans total by day. It shows me the devices used, whether it was Apple, Android, Windows Phone, scans at the time of day. This vendor shows it by a heat map. All of it is, all of the vendors that I've interacted with, well over 10 in doing my research, the top 10 hotspots of vendors, so to speak, they all offer data to be exported. Different vendors show the information in different graphs. So it's just whatever you're comfortable with once you do your research. But I like this heat map that shows the time of day and the saturation of the scan. And then the city scan by city is also another feature that most of the vendors offer this. Some of the free options don't, but the majority of them do. I think I ran into one that didn't, which is really interesting, especially if you are depending on what your business is, if you're nationwide, you know, your tri-state, you know, whatever. So it allows you to do that city level as well.
But it's really, if you think about it, Jada, sorry to interrupt. As I look at this, it reminds me of Google Analytics on a digital campaign, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
a lot of folks don't know that these types of reports are available on QR code. What marketer doesn't want to know this information in terms of crafting their additional marketing messages or reaching a certain type of client? I love the scans by day because you then can hone in on, especially as a restaurant, think about sending out, putting up a QR code or changing your QR code with specials every day and seeing how people click on those, or knowing what part of a specific geography people are inherently using your messaging more and being able to track it by day. So this is, thanks for sharing this. This is awesome stuff.
Yeah, another great thing that the scans by day shows is if you are advertising your business, you can see, you know, what works, you know. So if you had an ad run digitally or in print or a direct mail piece, whatever you use, you can see the peak of your, you know, your advertising scans and, you know what products to use in the future more. Another option that I was going to get you guys to go along with is, in the background behind me is a QR code, and this will allow you to request a QR code from me if you want to. But I did want to show you, we have all of these, you know, privacy acts and opt-in and opt-out rules. The majority of the vendors that offer GPS, well, most of the vendors that offer GPS location tracking, does have the option for the opt-in or opt-out. So if you do scan this QR code, you'll see it's going to ask you allow or don't allow the location. And if you do allow, but basically what it does is it just drops a pin basically saying I'm at X location. It doesn't feed back to anything. So like somebody that allows their location is not going to get spammed with anything. It just allows you to give this hyper local focus on what maybe you want to advertise, where you want to advertise, how you want to advertise, things like that. So it is compliant. And if you do scan that and fill that out, I will send you a QR code. So that's just, live action, how it works for gaining that opt-in acceptance for the GPS coordinates that
And
follows.
it will give folks an opportunity if they want us to build a QR code and send it to them. They'll have access to the reporting. And this is like a middle of the road QR code. Again, there are other QR codes like a flow code that provides different utility and provides different reporting. But it may also be a way for you to kind of dip your toe into the pool and see if it's something you want to experiment with. So thanks for doing that, Jada.
Of course. Next slide.
So going to walk through some case studies with you. Again, I want to give a shout out to our partners at Flowcode who put some of these together. This just shows 8 ads that were launched across linear or CTV platforms across a host of different segments. I gotta point a couple of them out. I got a call from our friend over at Flowcode when they originally signed Kim Kardashian, and there was a big deal being made about the fact that her company is utilizing Flowcode only and acting as representatives of Flowcode. And then, of course, just from a personal standpoint, I love the show Yellowstone. So you can see their QR code there, which looks like one of those movie set flapper boards. And who wouldn't click on that to get to buy merchandise around Yellowstone? So shopping the scenes, as they call it. I didn't buy a hat that would make me look like Rip, but I'm wondering if I should have, since he's well respected on that show. So anyway, here's an example of Flowcode usage across broadcast, linear, and CTV platforms. Pretty cool, I think. Next, please. Just some examples here. Here's one that Flowcode provided to us from Food Network. This is pretty cool. So think about the utility here, especially for those foodies who are watching the Food Network. They throw up a QR code or flow code up on the screen. It can scan to a recipe. It can scan to an offer, a tutorial of some kind, where to buy ingredients. So they can third party that and sell sponsoring around different outlets that sell ingredients, specifically where to shop for appliances or scan to see more recipes. So pretty impressive stuff when you think about in real time the ability to interact with folks, and for the Food Network to see where those scans are coming from and set up those heat maps. It gives them a good sense of what's happening from an audience standpoint. Can't emphasize this enough. Next slide, please. I thought this was pretty cool. So this was Turner Sports, who set up the ability to donate. We remember in the old days, you used to have to get on the phone and call into a helpline, right? So these days, all you do is open your camera, aim, and tap, as they suggest. Over 35% of the calls were from ads with the flow code. 1 million meals were donated because of the scans, and 90% of those who clicked in utilizing the QR code were all new donors. That's pretty impressive analytics. And I did see one of the questions in the chat, which is the age groups or the types of audience that you reach. This opens you up across every demographic profile, but obviously this is a way to interact with younger folks who probably have a greater propensity, but don't to use a QR code, but don't believe at all that the senior segment isn't using it, because they are. I'll give you an example later on. Next, please. This was, I know we've got some of our agency partners here, and as an agency, we think about this as well. This is an example of a media organization that put in front of one of their clients $250,000 new business campaign utilizing a QR code, and 100% new revenue, 100% campaign share, 100% owned and operated revenue, aligned with the campaign that this agency or publisher put together. And I think that's pretty cool. So they're Our use is not only if you are a retailer, but as a media company or as an agency or as someone who represents others. QR codes have a great utility across each of these different segments. Next, please. And then, of course, the famous Planters Peanut Super Bowl ad, right? So you can see the QR code. I can't imagine that there's any form of media today that doesn't deserve to have a QR code embedded. 76% scanners viewed the content. 45% of the scanners opted to share precise location. How awesome. Again, you know, those location attributions similar to what you get from Google Analytics on digital campaigns, 84% scanned with an iOS device. So interesting stuff there in the use of QR codes across these mediums as well. Next, please. And then just an ad brand sweepstakes. This was for Welch's. You can see the QR code itself. This is a feature of flow code, the utilization of that flow code or QR code as a logo and the ability to brand that QR code with your own brand. In this particular segment for Welch's, there were over 100,000 entries, 431,000 video views, 56% conversion rate. Why wouldn't you utilize a QR code in all of your marketing as a result of the interaction? If you think, by the way, someone's going to type in your URL, I think you're slightly mistaken, though. Of course they will, but why not give utility to someone who can open up a camera quick, click on it, and be taken to the information that they want? That's why you're seeing much more utility across the board. And then next slide, please. And thanks for letting us share these different examples with you. These are just things to stimulate the imagination. I think you probably get a really great sense right now that there is no medium by which you can't add a QR code. We don't have a vested interest in any of the QR codes you might desire to use. Jade is going to share with you why some might be used other than one over the other. But that's going to be a decision, obviously, that you're going to have to decide. Here's something for Cox Automotive in terms of buying a new or used cars from them. How cool that you scan the QR code. It takes you right to vehicle description pages, and which is where ultimately automotive advertisers are trying to go. So 3 times more time was spent on site than when they didn't use a QR code. 3 times more pages were viewed than when they didn't use a QR code to access it. And 98% were new quality leads. So I truly believe, and it shows statistically, that you can generate new audiences through this technology by embedding it in your marketing. So please keep that in mind across the board. Next, please. I think this is a point where Jade has put together a chart that compares a lot of the brands. And Jada, thanks for doing that. That was really some great overview. I love the way, by the way, you use kind of that restaurant rating system of what's more expensive and what's least expensive.
Yeah, we're all familiar with those dollar signs, so
Right.
we knew what they mean.
Yeah.
Before I get into this vendor comparison, I did see a question pop up about using QR codes in digital advertising. Since you're already probably on your phone, how do you scan that QR code? Well, if you take a screen grab on your phone of any QR code that you see on a website or whatever, and then open it in your photos, I know personally I have an iPhone, it will detect that there's a QR code in the photo, and it will do exactly the same steps it does when you scan one. So it will pop up that website for you to click on and then take you to the website or whatever it is. So, yeah, so that's a really great way to use it in digital advertising. So thanks for that question. This is just a chart of QR code vendors that I kind of Googled what are the top 10 hot QR code vendors. Some of these I'm very familiar with and have used, and all of these I did their free trial, so I could see how they performed in reference kind of for these check marks to each other. These are just in alphabetical order, but the cost I did menu style, they obviously could change, so I didn't want to put exact amounts. And these are kind of the middle of the road pricing points for them that I compare. They all have lower ones, they all have higher ones. A lot of them offer white glove enterprise, so to speak, plans. And then the majority of them do offer the free ones as well. So the one thing you want to remember if you're choosing a QR vendor, you're like, hey, this one's only $25 a year. Just remember a static code. They offer static and dynamic codes. A static code is something that the majority of vendors do not offer tracking or any kind of reporting for. It's just something that maybe your general website that, that's never going to change. You want to get people to that, and you don't necessarily care how many people have scanned it. That's what a static code is. A dynamic code are those that offer reporting, and they some vendors offer them to be, you can change the URL at any time. So you want to reference that as well. You might want to change it to or a different URL, or you might want to change it to a different image or a PDF mid-cycle. So you really want to read about whether or not you're able to change the QR code, what it links to in mid-cycle. A lot of these vendors offer expiration dates on QR codes. So you can definitely tell they all offer scans for dynamic codes, device type, ability to add a logo. These particular ones do that. The tracking is obviously the one thing that is, some don't offer the GPS coordinates, things like that. And then really what comes down to price is the user interface once you're in there. So Flowcode and Scanova, they offer a really robust user interface. They even offer, so us as a media company, if we were contracted with them, I would be able to set up a client dashboard so you could go in and look at it anytime. You wouldn't have to wait for me to send you a report, things like that. So those types of things are things, depending on your company's needs, you may want to look into. Another thing that some of these vendors offers that I didn't list here is Flowcode calls it Flow Page. Beacon Stack calls it a QR page, I think, or a landing page. I can't remember the exact technology or term. But if a customer doesn't have a website, it allows you to create a landing page for them that's just simple. So it looks like a website, not necessarily links to a JPEG or anything like that. So, most, people do have a website, but there are a lot of small businesses that don't. They don't have the manpower or, it's, the money to have it updated or, hosted. So that's another cool, it's another cool feature depending on what purpose you're using QR codes for, if it's for you or if you're, a marketing a company that, allows you to have some flexibility for your customer. I will have in a couple of slides later, I think there's a QR code where you can have access to this as a PDF. So you can, look at this for yourself and, go to these particular vendors and, do your own research if you would like. Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Jada. And in this particular case, here are QR codes, that vendor comparison sheet. You can see it there. So just open your camera, aim, and click. Our contact information, should you like to reach out to us, please feel safe to and feel free to. Jada is our resident expert, so technical questions, please send her way. And a request for a QR code will take you to a simple form that's been put together. And Jada, I saw one of the questions was how long does it take to get a QR code if it's one that will provide them?
Usually the turnaround's about 24 hours. If it's on a Friday, it might be Monday, but typically 24 hours. So I try to get them back to you as soon as possible.
Yeah. So excellent. So please aim and shoot. We would appreciate that very much. I think that is it for us, Paula and team.
Yes, I'm trying to get back on. If the tech team can, it says unable to start video. If you could click on your chat, there we go. Thank you so much. Let me start back on. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us during this presentation. We're now going to go ahead and start with the question and answers. We do want to thank Paul and Jada. Very interesting, very useful information. Again, we want to remind you to please put your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat, in the Q&A box. We have several questions, so we're going to try to get through as many as possible today. If you prefer to send your questions to one of our team members, you can go ahead and do that. You can put them in the chat box as well. We are including the email addresses for Paul and Gennari, our VP of Advertising at California Times, and for Katie Mussolf, Director of Digital Strategy at Digital Stats. Those are going to be in the chat box. I'm also sharing their emails with you, and Paul already shared his QR code as well. paul.engineeri@sduniontribune.com. And for Katie, it's katie@statsdigital.com. Again, you can check the chat box for that. All right, let's go ahead and start with the questions. We do have several questions. As I mentioned, we're going to try to get through as many as possible today. The first question says, we have an older audience. Should we still use QR codes?
Jada, if you don't mind, I'll take that one. I got to tell you that I think for any age audience, you can use QR codes. I'd love to share a story with you. I was talking to my dad the other day. He's 91 and lives with my brother, and they got him a smartphone not long ago. And I'll tell you what, he has embraced that technology like crazy. And I was telling him about this upcoming seminar, and he's like, yeah, I clicked on a QR code the other day, and then I was looking at buying XYZ. So don't believe that this is limited to younger folks. Anybody who owns a smartphone. And Jada, what did we show as penetration of smartphones in the US population today?
86% of Americans have a smartphone. That's
so
a lot.
That's a lot. And that's across all age and all demographics. So make it easy. And if anything, you could consider the fact that the easier you make it for any age, the more likely they are to interact with you. So I hope that makes sense.
Agreed.
Okay, we have another question here. It says, if you can send us the list to compare the QR code vendors. So that was included in the presentation?
Yep.
Correct. Yeah, so
will...
you could scan that QR code that was on there, or we can send it out to you as a PDF after. I can send it to attendees after the fact.
And Jada, your email address, what is that?
It's Jada, JADA.Scarborough, SCARBROUGH @SDUnionTribune.com.
Thank you. Another question, when would a static versus dynamic code be needed or useful?
Well, I think for static versus dynamic, it depends on what you want to get out of it. So if you just want to, let's say you have a more unique business name or a URL that, you know, somebody's not necessarily going to remember, and that may not have to do with your URL or your business name. I have a hard time remembering things. So if you have, you want people to get to you and you don't necessarily want to know how many people scanned a code or who scanned it, when, where, why, whatever, then a static code is for you. A majority of static codes can't be changed mid-cycle, so you can't change the URL. So if you update your website, you can't do that. Dynamic codes do offer you that versatility of the reporting, as well as some vendors offer you the opportunity to change the destination. You can't change destination, like if it was a URL QR code, you can't change it to go to a PDF, but you can change it from one URL to another URL, or a PDF to a PDF, or an image to an image. So you can update those. So depending on your needs, I think the majority of people that use QR codes use dynamic ones just because they want to know who scanned their code. And so they can use that information to further their advertising and marketing, and also how to create pages that their future QR codes link to.
And I would also say, Jada, correct me if I'm wrong, there are free QR code services out there. I would say the majority of them probably provide a simple static QR code. There are apps that you have on your phone that and you can find online that you can do free QR codes. So most of those are probably static. If you do any of the dynamics, it's probably going to be with a service that you may probably spend a fee on, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, some of the free QR code, the vendors that do offer the free QR codes, maybe only 1 or 2 dynamic QR codes, and you can't change them, things like that. They do offer reporting for those, but it limits the number of QR codes that you can have active at any time. So if you're a company that wants to have, 5, 10, 15, whatever, depending on your sale or for your products in store, then you would definitely need to go with something that is cost-based, but you don't necessarily have to go with one that's hundreds and hundreds or thousands of dollars. So
We have another question here. It says, can you put QR codes on clothing, sweaters, hoodies, t-shirts, pockets or sleeves, baseball cap? And also there's one that's similar that says if you can use it on social media, for example, on LinkedIn.
Well, when I was at WonderCon a few weeks back, I did see QR codes for booth workers on their shirts. So some of them had it on their sleeves, some of it had it on their back. So they do work as long as the medium that it's on is not something that will blur the QR code out a lot, over like 30%, then the QR code will scan. So I don't recommend, creating your QR code in sand or anything like that. But you never know what they'll do. I've seen them on cakes, like cupcakes. So they're printed on there. So yeah, you could just put it on whatever.
I'd also add to that you'd want to make sure it's a dynamic QR code so that you can change the destination of the code. So you'd hate to have a shirt or a sweater that has a QR code that at some point becomes irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
I would also say, as we mentioned earlier, that QR codes are very stable, and even if they degrade up to 30%, you can still utilize that QR code. So it takes a wash, but you can still wear it, and that QR code will still be there. I think it's a pretty great use, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you. Another question. What statistics have you found for QR codes on 15-second spots? We use a lot of 10-second and 15-second spots, but feel it may be too short for customers to get their phones out to scan.
Right. So I personally don't have a lot of statistics for that, but I can get that information. So if you would send me an email, we'll throw that slide up with our contact info too at the conclusion, so you can scan it for my email, because I know my last name's long. But I do want to reiterate, we talked about this earlier. If you do videos or audio, make sure that you do have your autoplay turned off and give the user an option to turn it on, because they could be somewhere where they don't want a loud video or whatever. You could also put in the call to action, maybe what are your messaging, what the content might be or how long it is. I know that might help somebody to, want to take it, because to me, the quicker it is, the more I want to watch it. I don't want to watch a 5-minute video. So, that could help too, but definitely I can get some more statistics about that and get that along to you guys. So great question.
Thank you. What generations are more apt to utilize and embrace QR codes? Millennials, Gen X, Zoomers, Boomers, or the silent generation?
I think everybody does. I think, just being in a large crowd recently, seeing all of the different age ranges, everybody was scanning them. It was definitely something that since the last time I had been at a convention, I saw an increase of people taking photos of them to reference later or scanning them right there. And ultimately, people crave information. So no matter what your age, people want to know more information. And if it's definitely something they're interested in, they're going to start scanning it. If that's the way you offer your data. I think Paul had mentioned earlier that you can, put a lot more data in a QR code and what it scans to than you could an ad or on your website, and make it easier to read. Somebody can reference it again later. They don't have to hold on to a piece of paper or a magazine or a direct mail piece or whatever. So they can bookmark it and read it whenever they want to.
Yeah, I would say statistically speaking, and I was reading an article about this in preparation for this event. I would, and what it said was basically that there is a preference towards younger users simply because they've grown up with this technology. It's become second nature to them. And so if you are a business that is trying to gain a larger audience, a larger younger audience, you most definitely need to have QR codes as part of that strategy, because certain audiences and ages are used to using this technology. They weren't around before the use of this technology, but don't in any way discriminate against every age group, because what we're seeing is the reemergence of QR codes within the everyday uses for people. And just as I mentioned, my 91-year-old dad is into QR codes. In fact, he said he's looking for them now. So, but I would say that it probably leans a little younger, but I think that's going to be a shift very quickly.
We have another question. It says, I'm on my cell phone watching the Zoom presentation, and you mentioned the QR code for us to scan or link to. How does one do that on a cell phone?
So if you're on a cell phone, you can actually just take a screen grab of what you see on your phone. And then once it goes to your photo gallery, you just go to the gallery and then open that particular photo. And your phone will recognize that it has a QR code in it, and it will act just like it did if you scanned the like you were live scanning the QR code. So it'll recognize that, and then it'll give you that little yellow button that'll pop up for you to go to that link.
They're asking, where can you create a QR code? They don't see the URL or the company name. Oh,
for me to create one for you?
No, I think just in general, it just says, where can you create a QR code?
Well, the easiest place to find one is just to go Google, how do I create a QR code? And different vendors will pop up. And then from there, you can choose which one you want to use. There are actually services that offer a quote unquote lifetime QR code. So if you only want one and you want to be able, and it's going to be xyz.com and that's going to be it forever, there are services that offer a fee, and it's like the few that I've seen are like $150, and that QR code is good forever. So you don't necessarily have to subscribe to anything. There are a lot of free services. So you just choose one that, meets your needs and is easy for you to create those codes and you feel comfortable with. Some people are comfortable with user interfaces, and then some people, depending on the user interface, that has a lot to do with people's, ability to, interact with it. If you hate the color green and everything's green, you might want to go with a different vendor, so it's just simple as that. There's so many vendors that offer the same same elements and the ability to do the same thing. So you can just find which one that you want to use.
Yeah, Paul, I know we're running out of time. We probably only have time for one more question. Everyone should feel comfortable. Please shoot Jada or myself any other questions they have. If we've failed to answer them, we don't want to do that. And we'd be happy to get back to you.
One last question. Can you do a combination of a static and dynamic code, or strictly one or the other on your QR code?
Well, it is one or the other. A static just means that you don't have reporting, and dynamic means that you do, or have other features. So it's basically whether if you want a static, you just want people to get to your information, or the dynamic is if you want to have reporting, and then the ability to, if the vendor offers it, the ability to change the what it links to mid-cycle of your code or your campaign or whatever you want to do.
Thank you. Before we close, Jada and or Paul, is there something else you would like to add?
We're just very appreciative of everyone who attended. We hope that you gained some insight. Of course, this is an emerging world, and we will stay attuned to it and continue to use us. You've got our contact information. We like to be in that thought leader space, so please don't be shy and reach out. Okay, Jada?
Yeah, and then they just put up the slide with our contact info. You can scan those or take a picture of it and scan it later. And then the QR code vendor comparison sheet is also there, and the code to request for me to create you a QR code to try it out to see if you like it. So yeah, just reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you. Before we end, I am going to share the San Diego Business Connection website, where you can watch and share this webinar next week, as well as past webinars on other topics. It is San Diego Union-Tribune.com/San Diego Business Connection. You can see the chat box where we're going to be putting the website URL for you. The presentation that you saw will also be available on the website, or you may contact Fiona Leong at fiona.leong@sduniontribune.com to receive the presentation via email. We are putting Fiona's email in the chat box as well. For more information on digital stats, you may visit digitalstats.com. Also see the chat box for that website URL. Again, thank you very much to Paul Ingeneri and to Jada Scarborough for presenting today's seminar. And thank you very much for tuning in today and for participating. We had lots of questions, lots of interest on this topic. This concludes today's San Diego Business Connection seminar. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.